After a recent Lorecast, we know more information involving the next few sets of Lorcana, including Hyperia City. Let me dive into some theory crafting and you can join me on this edition of X Marks for Lore. Blast my hearties and welcome aboard. I am your man with a plan, as per usual, Dom the Experticals, your captain of the Azurite crew, and today we are diving into set 13 of Lorcana, aka Hyperia City. Now, if you don't know quite where this all comes from, Hyperia City was revealed from the most recent Lorecast as of me recording and releasing this video. If you want a full breakdown as to what was shown during that Lorecast, I have videos down in my description, as well as little pop-ups that will show up on screen for you, including a separate video going over all the card reveals and deck theory ideas. But we're not here to worry about that. Today, we're theory crafting about Hyperia City, and the fact that Ravensburger could be planning something much bigger than we may be thinking. First things first, it's key to note that the key art for Hyperia City does feature Miguel from Coco, and it's great to see him. I'm really looking forward to seeing more Coco cards coming forward, especially the different song cards that we can get from there, especially Remember Me, and other cards like Poco Loco. Coco by itself has 1,000,001 different cards I'm really excited for. But we're not actually basing this video off of, oh, what Coco cards can we see? It's what else we can see in general. Because looking at the key art of Hyperia City, it's definitely pushing the idea of song, being from Coco or from other things. But the name Hyperia is very close to something else that's Disney related. Now, this was brought up during the conference that I had with other creators a week before the Lorecast happened. We were allowed to ask some questions to the developers, and one of the questions that was asked was, is Hyperia City named after Hyperion Studios? And if you don't know, Hyperion Studio was the studio from back in the day. We're talking 1926, where Walt Disney pretty much started. This is where we started seeing the Mickey Mouse cartoons, this is where we started seeing the City Symphonies cartoons, and a bunch of other projects before they moved out from Hyperion Studio. So if, and this is a big if because it was not confirmed by the developers at all, if Hyperia City is potentially named after Hyperion Studio, does this mean that we can correlate movies or shorts that were made at Hyperion Studios and whether they could potentially be in the Hyperia City set? Let's dive in a bit deeper, shall we? Now, one of the biggest IPs that came from Hyperion Studio was Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and quite frankly, we haven't had a lot of Oswald representation in Lorcana just yet, so this could be the set where we see Oswald and old school Mickey combine forces and we have more of a old school 1920s feel to that set of Lorcana, featuring some really old school characters, which could even introduce the old school versions of Clarabelle, finally getting Horace for Horse, old school versions of Donald, Goofy, and all of our favorites, which would be incredible, including the potential of Oswald's partner Hortensia also getting a card in Lorcana. It could happen, and I'm looking forward to it. Now, one of the biggest projects to come from Hyperion Studio from back in the day was back in the 1920s, when in the space of 3 weeks we had the first ever Mickey Mouse short, simply known as Plain Crazy. If you haven't seen this short, it's really wacky and I quite enjoy it. And the short is a testament to how nuts Walt Disney was. This was made in 3 weeks back in the 20s and solidified Mickey Mouse as a mainstay for everybody. But this also featured Mickey and Minnie in their very old school designs. So, like I said earlier, does this mean we could potentially see old school Mickey and Minnie in black and white in this set? Alluding to another potential idea, could we potentially see 2 new ink colors come into the game, being white and black? ink. I know that's a bit of a stretch, and that's probably like the deepest, probably like most terrible theory out of this entire video. But could you imagine white and black ink, or maybe white and black inked cards that are technically uncolored cards that can be splashed into any deck? There's potential here. But you may know, Hyperion Studio is probably the most famous for Walt Disney's first ever theoretical release, being Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And we know Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs have had quite a few cards in Lorcana at the moment, so this could mean when Hyperia City releases, we could see even more from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Now, I don't think we should see Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs as their typical versions, because we've seen that a couple of times now. I would really like to see Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs done a bit differently again. It was great when we got the Seven Dwarf Knights. I thought that was incredible. Maybe we could do another spin on it. And in fairness, we haven't actually had the Seven Dwarfs in the mine. Like an actual big conjoined piece of artwork of every dwarf from the Seven Dwarf family actually in the mine. And we don't have song cards for Dig 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 or Hi-Ho! Because, in fairness, Off to Work We Go could be a brilliant song card waiting to happen, and this could be the set to do it. Including songs like I'm Wishing, which is obviously a very monumental song. Even if it's a card where it's that view from the well looking upwards as Snow White is singing into the well to have the echo back to her, and the Prince Charming shows up saying, "Good day." I would actually fall in love with a card like that. The potential is nuts for just these ideas alone. But even with these ideas, that's not the core of this video. Because the core of this video, ladies and gentlemen, is the Silly Symphony cartoons. Now, you may have seen some of these, you may have never even heard of any of these, but the Silly Symphony cartoons are a series of 75 cartoons beginning in 1929 with, you guessed it, the very heavily memed cartoon, The Skeleton Dance, which I'm sure you've seen with spooky, scary skeletons. That is where the dance comes from. Hyperion Studios, Disney, and Silly Symphony. Which alludes to the question, which of these could potentially get Lorcana cards? Or are they all potentially capable of getting Lorcana cards? I'm not going to dive into the entire list of 75 cartoons because we're going to be here forever. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to point out some of my personal favorites that I think has a very high chance of showing up in this set. And if they do show up in this set, what we could potentially see in varieties of characters, ink colors, you name it. So let's do a bit of guesswork, shall we? So first things first, Skeleton Dance. I mean, the memes are one thing, but I think it makes perfect sense for Skeleton Dance to be in the game somehow. Even if we don't see the skeletons as actual characters, having the Skeleton Dance as a song or even an action could be really funky. And it would be funky if the Skeleton Dance is all about either exerting opposing characters, because it's all about spooky characters with shivers down your spine, and if you're shivering down your spine, you're being which means exert because you're terrified, which could work out, or because it's involving skeletons and the skeletons are dancing, it could mean also that you bring characters out from your discard to then give them rush, and then at the end of your turn banish all characters that were bought out this way, which sounds a little extreme, but if you also make it a high cost card that's able to pull it off, I think it could be a potential crazy card to put out there. And I like my ideas of designing really crazy cards, but even if it's just for the memes, I would love to see Skeleton Dance. Another huge short from the Silly Symphony series, which I think would be beautiful in cards coming into Lorcana, and debatably would also be amazing for enchanted cards, maybe even potentially an iconic card, is the Ugly Duckling. It's an iconic story, it's a very emotional story at that, and this cartoon is iconic from when it came out back in the day in 1931 for the original. And with this, you can have so many things going on. You can just have an action card where it's the ugly duckling kind of pushed away from all the other ducklings, which is very upsetting, but it can do a quirky effect of, because it's isolated, it can only exert one character, or it can exert all other characters bar one, because that odd one is the ugly duckling. Maybe the ugly duckling itself can have a base version and then a shift version, where the shift version is where, I'm no longer ugly and can kick some butt, which I would love to see. I think the ugly duckling himself will probably be in amber, maybe in sapphire, in order to display elements of sorrow and grief. But then the other ducklings will probably be in ruby because they're quite rude and malicious to him. But even with all that as ideas, ugly duckling in Lorcana would be beautiful, also a little bit tragic. But if you have beautiful artwork in there that truly shows the ugly duckling in Technicolor, or if you keep them in black and white, I think they can be really well sought after cards. This is right up there as probably my #1 I want this in Lorcana film, because quite frankly, if you've been watching any of my short form content, you know I've been talking about this bad boy for ages. 3 little pigs in Lorcana would go insanely hard. And just giving you an idea as to what I'm thinking for the 3 little pigs, you can't tell me that we wouldn't be privy to 3 location cards. We would have the house made of straw, the house made of sticks, and the house made of bricks as 3 individual location cards. And then the big bad wolf himself, where the big bad wolf would be in ruby. When you play him, you banish all locations, your locations and your opponent's locations, so it's effectively a location board wipe, and all characters at those locations. The caveat being, this character cannot banish locations called the house made of bricks. So because that's in place, if you have the little pigs in the house made of bricks and the big bad wolf is played and tries to blow the house down, he can't because it's made of brick. It's a little homage to the show and the classic story. I would love that as a little mechanic to put in there. And quite frankly, having a board wipe that specifically hits locations and characters at that location could work really nicely. It's a different kind of board wipe, and if locations prove to become more prevalent as the sets move on, this could also be a mainstay potential mechanic that people could end up splashing into their decks, even if it's just a quirky one-off. So yeah, I'm all in on the 3 little pigs. I think if nothing else gets picked, Ugly Duckling and 3 little pigs will do it for me. Give me these 2 things. Now, probably up there with the 3 little pigs and the Ugly Duckling is another short film which, quite frankly, I think is so iconic, it needs to be depicted into Lorcana if we're going to go this route. It is The Tortoise and the Hare, done from January 5th, 1935. This obviously retells the classic story of the tortoise and the hare and the legendary race that they go under. So you can imagine that the hare will probably have Rush, come out onto the board and immediately be able to bop into things at crazy high speeds and be able to do some crazy stuff. Maybe there is a thing to be said about the hare, and when you play the hare can immediately travel into a location, and the location can be a brand new version of the finishing line, but not from Speedway. It's its own thing unique to the tortoise and the hare, where if you cross through the finishing line, something quirky happens. That's a potential right there for you. And then the tortoise himself, where he may not necessarily gain Rush straight away, but who's to say that he couldn't have an effect on him, maybe an amethyst, where you play him and he can't gain Rush. But then, after so many turns, he keeps building up his attack value. So the longer he's out on the board, the higher his attack value gets. Or, because it's an amethyst, maybe the higher his lore total gets. So that when he finally quests, you win the game, because the tortoise ends up winning the race. And it's not about how fast you are, it's how slow you are. So can you imagine a deck built around the tortoise, where the tortoise is gradually building up lore, and you have to delay your opponents, shut down your opponents, stop them from being able to either deal damage or immediately banish the tortoise, while the tortoise just builds up lore and potentially quests for game out of nowhere. That could be a really quirky design decision, but even if I'm completely wrong and I have no idea how to design games, even though I went and did a game design course at university, hey, do you want to hire me, Ravensburger? Regardless of that, I just think the tortoise and the hare would be perfect if we are taking this route with Hyperia City. But on top of the tortoise and the hare, you do have the follow-up cartoon, which I also remember really enjoying. From August 22nd, 1936, Toby Tortoise returns. This is the great return of Toby Tortoise as he takes on the hare one more time, but this time in a boxing match. And this time round, you've got some even quirkier things that happen. You have the classic boxing match between the hare and the turtle, where some crazy tech happens. I'm also thinking this could be the perfect opportunity to reprint Referee Pete. You know, wink wink nudge nudge. But going alongside the tortoise and the hare, it just gives us access to more cards with existing characters to spread things out. However, I completely understand if this is a little bit too much for Hyperia City and you just want to add a little bit from all the different shorts and not overwhelm people with too many of hyper-specific shorts. So you could even potentially hint towards Toby Tortoise Returns being in the follow-up set to Hyperia City, but maybe not depicted in Hyperia City itself. It's an option. And those are at least my main things that I'm theory crafting when it comes to Hyperia City. A bunch of the City Symphony cartoons can be represented, a bunch of the old school stuff such as Oswald and old school Mickey can be depicted, and potentially Seven Dwarfs making a big comeback yet again. But these are all my ideas, these are all my theory crafting, crazy zany plans that I can think of. What are you thinking of? Let me know your ideas and your theory crafting down in the comments section below. And while you're down there sending me a message, why don't you also hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on any more explosive action this side of the Azurite Sea. If you do want to check in on any of my other videos concerning the recent information about the Wilds Unknown, Attack of the Vine and Hyperia City, you can check those videos out down in the description below so you don't miss out on any juicy information or any other juicy deck theory ideas that I have. I hope to see you next time on the Azurite Sea for another Lorcana video diving into some more juicy information, be that some games, deck techs, or information that you may not be aware of. Until next time, folks, I hope to see you out there in the Azurite Sea. Be sure to join the most explosive crew on the Azurite Sea as well, and I'll be seeing you next time. Now, even though Hyperia City could be all about songs and city symphonies, you could say, I'm really hyped for it.